And it was a challenge to kind of live your life that way. And that's how you got hooked up with Martin Luther King. We were really serious about God parting the Red Sea. I mean, it was not mythology. When Martin was in jail in Birmingham, and we were marching to the jail, and Bull Connor was there with the dogs and the fire hoses, and we stopped and we knelt to pray. We didn't know what was going to happen. The Friday before, we had been fire hosed and the dogs were put on us. But when we stopped to pray, all of a sudden the dogs stopped barking. Somebody jumped up and shouted, "God is with this movement, we're going on to the jail." And Bull Connor was shouting, "Stop them." And people just started walking quietly and deliberately. And the fire hoses and the fire trucks parted. And we walked right on through and went to the jail. And somebody shouted, "God done parted the Red Sea one more time." I'm saying that the life of the scriptures became real. And the study of the prophets as espoused by Abram Isaac Heschel, not only helped to shape the civil rights movement and the life of Martin Luther King, but continues to plague us with problems of conscience to this day. And I always have to remind myself when I'm preaching in my church at home that just because the prophets made everybody mad doesn't mean that I have to make everybody mad every time I preach. But you know, you shall know the truth, and the truth might make you mad, even though it will set you free. And so the idea of living in a context of faith is the only way we can survive as a people. But it's not very comfortable. It's not always polite. It keeps us challenged to be better, to do better, and it always lets us know that we don't belong to ourselves. We do belong to God. Now, for some reason, and I think for good reason, I could not read a lot about slavery. But as I got older, I did read some of the existential writings that came out of the Holocaust. And I was able to, I think, put all of these things in some kind of perspective and to try to live thoughtfully without bitterness and without rancor, and to realize that we are put here on this earth as God's people, and that God's work is never done. We would not have survived, possibly, in Selma. We would have been just another group of little ragtag black radicals. The fact that Abram Heschel showed up made us somebody special. That Ralph Bunche showed up with him. That Archbishop Jacobus of the Greek Orthodox Church remembered the persecution of the Greeks by the Turks and identified and showed up. Sometimes it's just required that we show up. We don't have to know all the answers. We don't even have to understand all the questions, but it is in the midst of injustice it's important that we show up as Abram Isaac Heschel showed up. The next conflict was the war in Vietnam. And Martin, by no fault of his own, left here after helping to work on voter registration with Carl Stokes' campaign. And who should he sit next to but Dr. Spock? And so for an hour and a half, 45 minutes to New York, Dr. Spock bent his ear about getting involved in Vietnam. And Dr. Spock actually wanted him to run for president, and Dr. Spock was going to be the vice president. Martin would have nothing to do with that, but that occasion made him take seriously the war in Vietnam. And then when we got back to Atlanta, there was Thich Nhat Hanh, a Buddhist monk, who came to try to help us understand why Buddhists were burning themselves in protest of the American presence there. And so Martin accepted the responsibility to speak out on the war in Vietnam, but he didn't want to speak out at a rally in New York, where at best you'd have 500,000 crazy people. There'd be another million that'd be sane and stable, but you gotta have, I mean, you cannot have a rally in New York where everybody's sane and peaceful and disciplined and, you know. And so we were thinking about what can we do? And we turned once again into Union Theological Seminary, and we said, if we could have a statement there in the company of people like Rabbi Heschel and Henry Steele Commager, we can get out a reasonable message and be protected and not be blasted as radicals and communists and what have you. We thought just the chapel at Union would be big enough. It turned out that we had to move it to Riverside Church. But once again, Rabbi Heschel was right there with him, giving biblical backing to the political position that Martin found himself having to take. And Henry Steele Commager gave a historical analysis. And I think that event, more than anything else, led to a change in the conscience of America about how we go about facing that war. But then we started talking about poverty. And we never got to Washington to talk about poverty. And so the work of Martin Luther King is still very much undone. The work of Rabbi Heschel is still not clear to us. We still need to ask, what is it that God requires of us in this day and age? And this discussion really gives us a wonderful opportunity to, each in his own way, give thanks for having known great men like this, and to this institution and the family of Rabbi Heschel for once again calling us to conscience and putting us in the presence of God with a big question mark in our mind and heart. What is it that the Lord requires of us now? Thank you.